Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. Apologies for the kazoo. These videos kept getting demonetized when I used music clips. Somebody suggested buying a kazoo, so I did. Welcome to another episode of LUME Wars, episode 2, or maybe it should be episode 5, if you see what I mean. Regardless, I have a lot of fun doing these videos. You know I love my LUME. I know that you love your LUME as well. And I've assembled even more watches than LUME Wars episode 1. I figured I would slightly change the format. I'm going to do it knockout style. So 8 watches, 4 quarterfinals, 2 semis, 1 final, only 1 winner. Let's flip the camera and find out who the protagonists are. What a fine selection of watches and a fine selection of contenders today for LUME Wars episode 2. 2 are on loan to me from Mr. X, 1 is on loan to me from Oris, Australia. Couple I've just picked up and a couple of them are sent in for review and are in the fairly extensive queue that I've got of watches coming up over the next 2 or 3 months. So allow me to briefly introduce you to all the competitors and then we'll split them off into their quarter-finalist pairs and they can go head-to-head. Rolex Explorer 1, that's Mr. X's obviously, going head-to-head against my Omega Seamaster Aquaterra. Likewise, the Girdle, the Golden Turtle, belongs to Mr. X. I'm going to put that head-to-head with a Seiko homage. Recently picked up the San Martin. Kind of looks like a 62 MES, but really it's an homage to the SLA 017. Next up, 2 Swiss-made divers. Christopher Ward, C60 Trident Pro 600, head-to-head against the Oris Aquis GMT. This Oris is on loan to me from Oris, Australia at the moment. And on the end, it's the Hamilton Khaki King, head-to-head with the PABLO. Now, PABLO is a GNOMON watches from Singapore, an exclusive. It's one of their own brands. They sent that in to me for review. Alright, first quarter final, we have a Seiko versus a Seiko homage. I thought that was fitting. Now the Girdle, the Golden Turtle, belongs to Mr. X. I rather persuaded him that he really needed to have a look at one of these relatively entry-level Seikos, but of course he picked the blingiest, gaudiest, and probably the most expensive turtle of the base model ones anyway. You can get one of these for about $235 US on Amazon. You'll find links to all of the watches that I'm going to show today in the description of the video if you want to pick one up for yourself or you're just keen to do a bit more research. I bought this San Martin a couple of weeks ago on AliExpress, part of their mid-year sale. They were selling it for about $205 US. That's not far off the regular price anyway. You can pick this one up on Amazon.com for $215 US. And I have to say, I'm very impressed with what I've seen so far. But how does its LUME stack up against the Girdle? So I'm going to conduct all of these head-to-heads in the same way. My camera is going to be using the same settings throughout. It can only do a maximum of 20 minutes of video, but I've always thought that that gave a pretty good gauge of what a watch's LUME looks like after maybe 4, 5, 6 hours. So here we have the San Martin on the left and the Seiko on the right, both in real time at the moment, but I'm going to speed them up in just a second. C3 on the left and Seiko's proprietary LUME Bright Lume on the right. San Martin, I have to say, very impressive initially, as is the Seiko, as is LUME Bright in general. Here they are going faster now, heading towards the 5, 6, 7 minute. First thing to go is the LUME pip on the San Martin. Often a weakness, but I must say those hands are hanging in nicely. Pretty strong result though from the LUME Bright. LUME Bright is well known to punch well above its weight, and it seems to be the case here as well. I wonder if it gets through this round how it will do against some of the more expensive Swiss offerings. Coming up to about the 15-minute mark, and the San Martin, those indices are beginning to fade. It looks like the Turtle is going to hang on in there to take this one. Yes, indeed it does. The first quarter final to the Girdle. Our next quarter finalists are a pair of Swiss-made dive watches. We've got the Christopher Ward C60 Trident Pro. and we've got the Oris Aquis GMT. Now, the Christopher Ward was sent to me for review by Christopher Ward. I did the full review yesterday. Very, very impressive little piece for the money. This Oris is on loan. I've got a couple of weeks with it, sent to me by Oris Australia, so I thought I could squeeze it into a couple of videos. Very impressed with what I've seen so far from the bigger Oris as well. Let's see how they stack up in terms of lume though. So two different lume types again in this one, again running at real time initially. It's the Oris on the left and the Christopher Ward on the right. So the Oris uses BGW9, it's got that kind of ice blue look, only a lume pip though, not a lumed ceramic bezel insert. The Christopher Ward, meanwhile, on the right has X1 grade C1 superluminova. So they're new, kind of top grade C1, but you do get a different colour from that. And as we start to speed things up, you can see that the ceramic bezel insert of the Christopher Ward is the first thing to go. The hands are hanging on in there though, but I must say this Oris looking pretty good so far. BGW9, I say it pretty much every time, it can be underwhelming if you don't pump a ton of it into the hands and the indices. Now the indices in the hands, not exactly enormous on the Oris, but they seem to have done the job. Christopher Ward fading to pretty much zero here as we're heading to about 15 minutes. The Oris looks like it's going to take this one very, very comfortably indeed. Indeed it does. All hands, indices and lume pip still hanging on very nicely at the 20-minute mark. This one could be a threat. Quarter-final 3 and perhaps the biggest mismatch of the competition, but I did want to squeeze both of these in, so hey, why not? Hamilton's the only field watch here, $350 or thereabouts from JOMASHOP, again links in the description. The PABLO is a diver, unashamedly retro style, a kind of mishmash of Tudor and Milsub and various other influences. Nice riveted bracelet. ETA 2824, $520 from GNOMON. Looks like a good value offering, but once again, how does the lume of these two watches, very different watches, stack up against each other? Yeah, perhaps a slightly unfair competition putting a dive watch which should have heaps of lume up against a field watch which shouldn't necessarily have as much. At regular speeds though, you can see the Hamilton, very attractive, all of those Arabics illumined as well as little dots on each of the hours. A very traditional Mercedes style hands though on the PABLO. They're both C3 superluminova. I'm guessing the PABLO has old radium style, judging by that kind of yellowy, deliberately patterned hue. Once you start speeding things up though, the hammy is gone. See you later, hammy. The hands kind of hang on in there. The PABLO doesn't do too badly for itself. The hands are the last things to go, but again, by the time we head towards the 10-minute, 12-minute, 13-minute, hammy's long gone. The PABLO, to be honest, isn't all that far behind it. It does better, as you would expect from a diver, at $500, but I don't think the PABLO will be getting too far in the competition today. And last but certainly not least, it's the big guns today, the two Swiss luxury pieces, Rolex Explorer 1 and Omega Seamaster Aquaterra. I think you could buy all of the other watches for the price of either one of these two. That is how much of a different league these two watches are in. But hey, money don't matter tonight, as Prince once said. It's all about the lume. Let's see how they get on. So they may be Swiss luxury watches, but they're neither of them actually dive watches. The Explorer is arguably the ultimate tool watch, and the Aquaterra a very attractive, dressy surf and turf style watch. Quite different looms used here as well. On the left is the Rolex, looking absolutely incredible. This is a 2018 model, so it's not the shorty with just the loomed hands. It's got a fully loomed dial, as is obvious. Rolex uses their own proprietary Chromalight as opposed to the BGW9 as used by Omega. Now there seems to be plenty of BGW9 stacked into those little triangular indices of the Aquaterra, but it can't cope once the time starts spinning towards the 10, 12, 15 minute. The Chromalight is very, very strong when it comes to lasting the distance. As we're heading towards the 20 minute, the Aquaterra is still legible, but there's only one winner here today, and it is that gorgeous looking lume on the Rolex Explorer. Could be a threat. On to the first of the two semi-finals then. The PABLO rather sailed through its heat against the Hamilton. It's going to have a much, much tougher time, I suspect, up against the Girdle and that all-conquering LUME Bright. Yes, quite a different challenging prospect here for the Pablo. You can see that a darker style of C3, it does give a beautiful glow initially against the very, very bright kind of white green of the Seiko's LUME Bright. Once you start spinning though, once we crank up the time, the Pablo does reasonably well for itself, but there is only going to be one winner here. Whether it's the SKX or even some of the base Seiko 5 models, as long as the big hands and big indices have got plenty of real estate on the dial, you can't really beat, on a budget watch anyway, you can't really beat Seiko's LUME Bright. It really does excel. I would say it's as good, if not better, than C3, as you've demonstrated today from the first one where it took on the San Martin and won. Pablo, you may have the specs here today with the ETA 2824 and that nice bracelet, but you're not going to beat the Seiko. Semi-final number 2, and it's Rolex versus Oris. Both of these watches coming through their respective quarters fairly comfortably. Will that killer chroma light see off the BGW9 in the Oris? Stay tuned. You would probably put your money on it, wouldn't you, considering that chroma light is essentially souped up BGW9. By the way, what happened to the GMT hand on the Oris? Does tracking that extra time zone suddenly not matter after dark? Disappointing there, Oris. But once we start the clock spinning quicker than usual, when you're getting up to about the 10-minute mark, when we're halfway, it's not looking all that good for the roller, is it? Those Arabics, as beautiful as they are initially, are beginning to fade. Plenty of lume on the indices and the lume pip of the Oris. It is an out-and-out dive watch after all. Let's not forget the Explorer is a tool watch and not a dive watch. We're getting towards 15 minutes and I must admit I was as surprised as anybody when I recorded this and then played it back. It's a win for the Oris, and quite a comfortable win for the Oris at that. I was not expecting this. Well, I don't think anybody would have expected these two to get to the final together. Perhaps the smart money was on Seiko's LUME Bright to make it this far, but the Oris taking out the Rolex, I certainly didn't expect that, and I'm the one running this competition today. Let's see how these two get on in the ultimate death match. There is a bit of a gulf in price between the two finalists, it should be noted. Your base model Turtle, not the golden one, about $235 US, about 400 Aussie. I saw one on sale last week. The Oris GMT, 3,700 Aussie list price. I would say you'd be picking one of these up for about 2.2, maybe 2.3 USD in the shops. Can the much cheaper Seiko hang on to what is clearly some very, very well applied BGW9 in the big Oris? It doesn't look like it, to be honest. The hands on the Seiko do pretty well, but those indices, especially up there around the 9, the 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, midnight, do seem to be fading quickly. It's by no means a walkover, but this one goes to the Oris. There can only be one winner, and today the winner of Lume Wars Episode 2 is the Oris Aquis GMT. I didn't really expect this one to win. My money was on that Rolex Explorer and its chroma light. Perhaps it would have beaten the Oris in that semi-final if we'd been here for 40 minutes on the camera rather than 20. But hey, I can't change the rules to suit one watch over another. That was the rules. The Oris won fair and square, and it beat the Seiko in the final for my money as well. Very, very impressive. It begs the question, why didn't they lume the GMT hand? Thanks very much for watching this one. I'll gather another group of eclectic and interesting timepieces for Lume Wars Episode 3.